Hello everybody, welcome to the Ultimate Scouting Show. Thank you guys for joining me. Today we are going to be doing another tier list. We have the NFL head coaches. So we are going to be separating them into 6 different tiers here. We've got elite coaches, great coaches, good coaches, mediocre and unproven coaches, uninspiring coaches, and coaches I think should be fired. So let's go ahead and hop right into this. I am going to try to separate, team success versus how good of a job I think they do as a coach. For example, if they have an amazing roster and they're really underperforming, that is worse to me than someone who maybe doesn't have the best roster, but is doing pretty well with it. So that is something to consider as well with this. So let's hop right into this. First up, we will go ahead and put these coaches in tiers, and then we will rank them afterwards within the tiers. Dan Campbell is someone I'm going to put in the mediocre and unproven tier. I really like the energy that he brings on a consistent basis. I think that, the Lions are starting to turn things around right now. Throughout this season, they've been on a little bit of a hot streak. I think they need to get their quarterback in there, but just from a pure mentality standpoint, I like what Dan Campbell does. We just need to see him win more games, and I think that they're on the right track to do that, but we just need to see a little bit more consistency there. I just think he's a little bit unproven right now in his ability to really command a winning football team. For Brian Daboll, this is going to start kind of a little bit of a trend of me putting coaches that I think have, done a great job, but they're still kind of young in their coaching careers with their teams. I'm going to put Brian Daboll in a good coach tier. With the talent level on this team, he has done an amazing job, absolutely getting the most out of his players on the New York Giants. I think he's done a great job there. He just needs to continue to amass more talent, and I think he can really climb up this tier ranking list. It is going to be, somewhat of sustained success that drives people up towards the top of this list. So I just want to continue to see that from Daboll, get him a little bit more talent. I think he's a great coach. Next up, we have Nick Sirianni. This might be a little bit controversial. I'm going to put him in the good coaches tier. The Eagles obviously have done a great job this season. I think they have one of the most talented rosters in the NFL, but I think that's just kind of a credit to Howie Roseman and what he's done with this roster. I think Nick Sirianni's done a good job. He gave up play calling last year to Shane Steichen, which I think has really kind of helped this team grow and develop as an offense, and they've looked really good, but I just do think that you need to continue to see a little bit more sustained success. I think part of the reason that, he has been so good this year is because the roster and the coaching staff around him, but I want to give Sirianni credit as well. He has done a really good job, just his second year with the Eagles, and they are one of the best teams in the NFL. Next, we have Pete Carroll. I'm also going to throw Pete Carroll in the good tier here. I was a little bit out on Pete Carroll before this season. I thought that, he was kind of benefiting from a lot of the talent around him, but it turns out, I think he was elevating a lot of talent. We see that with Russell Wilson. Geno Smith comes in and he's a great quarterback for them. So I really do think that Pete Carroll is doing a great job getting the most out of the talent on this roster. I think he's a very good coach. I do think he has benefited from some good teams throughout his tenure, but he has had a lot of sustained success, and I think that you got to give him credit for that. He is definitely a good coach. Next up, we have Todd Bowles. I think Todd Bowles is just pretty uninspiring. I think that this roster is way too talented to be where they are right now. Currently, they sit top of the division, but they're 5-6. They're below 500. With a team with Tom Brady and the weapons that they have, they should just be better than that. I think Bowles is a great person. He's a great defensive coordinator. But now with both the Buccaneers and the Jets as a head coach, he has looked really uninspiring, really bad. I just don't think he can handle the role as well as other guys can. And this just needs to be a better team based on the talent level. I'm going to have him in uninspiring. This is also going to be a very hot take, I think, but I think Brandon Staley is just an uninspiring coach. I think with the talent level on this roster, you've got Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler. Your offensive line is really stable when they're healthy. Defensively, you've got superstars like Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa. You've got Derwin James, J.C. Jackson. This should be a better unit than it is defensively. He's a defensive coach brought in, and they just haven't been very good defensively. Obviously, he was known for his aggressiveness on fourth down. That's kind of gone away. I just don't really love what I see from Brandon Staley. Obviously, he can turn this around, but for a coach that, has been there for a couple years now, he hasn't made the playoffs. I think that the Chargers have underperformed. Next up, we have Cliff Kingsbury. I have long been on the Cliff Kingsbury is bad train. I think you got to fire Cliff Kingsbury. You cannot go into next year with Kingsbury as your coach. His offensive schemes Some of them are creative, but they're just not getting the most out of the players. They continue to invest in skill positions rather than investing in defense in the trenches, and it's just not working out. I don't think that he was ever a good college coach. I don't really understand why he got this role, and I have long been on this fire Cliff Kingsbury train. I continue to be on that train, so that is where we will put him there. Next up, we have Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith is put in an unfortunate situation because of how terrible the Texans roster is. I do think he may get fired this year because they were just dreadful this year. I mean, so far they've not looked competitive in many games, and this talent level on this team is awful. It is absolutely atrocious. But I do think that at some point you've got to kind of get a coach in there that you really truly believe in. I don't know that they really truly believe in Lovie Smith as the future of this team. You're probably going to get a chance to take a franchise quarterback. Is Lovie Smith going to be the guy that gets to make that pick? I'd kind of doubt it. So I'm going to put him in the fired tier there. Next, we have Zach Taylor. I am a Bengals fan, and so I thought that Zach Taylor is really difficult to rank. I'm going to put him in the good tier because as a CEO type coach, a culture builder, I think he's really, really good. We can see that from, just the Bengals Super Bowl run last year. I think he's got players to buy in. He's adaptive. He's not, one of those guys that makes players adapt to his scheme. He's willing to adapt to the player's strengths. I think he's great at that. I also think him as a play caller isn't necessarily one of the best in the league. I think that, he leaves a lot to be desired as a play caller. He's gotten a lot better this year, but I think he's a good coach. I think that, he does a really good job with the team morale and building team chemistry and creating a really good locker room. I think he does a great job at that. As a play caller, not amazing, so I'm going to put him in that good tier for now. Next, we have Mike McDaniel. McDaniel has done a great job with the Dolphins this year. I'm going to put him in the good tier, much like Daboll. I just want to see a little bit more sustained success from him. I want to see how he does in the playoffs, but from what I have seen so far through his first season, I think he is a very good coach. He's getting the most out of Tua, out of the playmakers. His scheme is really, really well suited for those guys as well. I think he's innovative. I think he's fun. He's a weird dude, but I like it, and I'm going to put him in the good tier for now. Next, we have Mike Tomlin. I still think Tomlin is a great coach. I do think he has potentially been carried a little bit by Roethlisberger and the talent of a lot of those great Steelers teams that Bill Cowher developed. I do think that that can be true, but I also think he is a great coach. I think he gets players to fight hard for him. I think that he creates a good locker room culture for winning, and you just can't ignore the fact that he has never had a losing season. They probably will this year, but that is still ridiculously impressive, and you got to give him credit for that. I think he is a great coach. Another one that could be controversial here, I'm going to put Mike McCarthy in the mediocre and unproven tier. There are some things about McCarthy that I think is really impressive. I think he builds a great staff out. Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore are two of the top coordinators in the entire NFL. That's really impressive that he can, get those kinds of guys in the building and keep them there. Both of them have had head coaching interviews. They may not have been offered jobs necessarily, but just to keep them there, that is really impressive. I also think that McCarthy himself isn't necessarily the best coach. I think he is kind of carried a little bit by the talent around him and the coaching talent around him as well, but he has a lot of pull in the league. He's been there for a long time. Give him credit for what he has been able to do in this league. I think he was carried by Rodgers a little bit in Green Bay, but he has had sustained success as a coach. I'm going to put him in the mediocre and unproven tier just because I really don't think he himself is that amazing of a coach, but I understand the argument if you want to push him higher. Next, we have Josh McDaniels. I'm putting him in the uninspiring tier. Obviously, I think the Raiders should have been way better than this going into this season. McDaniels hasn't really done a great job. I don't think it's entirely his fault. I think the defense has played really poorly. The offensive line has been terrible, but he's just not getting the most out of, the best players on his team on a consistent basis. I don't think the Raiders can get out of his contract because of a cash basis. I mean, they had Gruden and they fired him and were paying him a lot of money. And now, they would be paying McDaniels a lot of money. if they fired him. So I think he stays around another season, whether he should or not. Next, we have Matt Eberflus. I'm going to put him in the mediocre and unproven tier. This is mostly because I think he's pretty unproven. I think he's done a good job getting the most out of, the really talentless roster that he has in Chicago. I think a lot of players like playing hard for him, and that's really impressive. But, the Bears are also one of the worst teams in the NFL. They currently hold the number 2 overall pick, and it's his first season. So we really don't know what Eberflus is. I think he's done a pretty decent job considering the circumstances, but you do have to consider that, they have won 2-3 games in his only season as a head coach. Next, we have Jeff Saturday. He was the interim head coach, obviously hired by the Colts. A lot of controversy there. I'm going to put him in fired. I just don't think he'll be retained. Obviously, you don't really fire an interim head coach, but I don't think he'll necessarily be retained. He's brought some juice, he's brought some energy, and, I think he can be a leader and potentially, use this as kind of a springboard to get into coaching. But, for a guy that just doesn't have any head coaching experience, he doesn't have any coordinator experience, I just can't imagine that the Colts would keep him around. Next, we have Sean McDermott. I'm putting him in the great coach tier. I think he's just done a great job building this Buffalo team from the ground up. I think they've done a really good job acquiring talent, accumulating talent, and developing talent. So you've got to give McDermott credit there. They're obviously one of the Super Bowl favorites at this point, so you've got to give them a lot of credit, and, I consider him a great coach. Bill Belichick is an absolute elite coach. A lot of people were wondering if Tom Brady or Belichick was the elite one. The answer is they're both elite. Belichick continues to get the most out of a pretty talent-deprived roster, particularly on defense. I just think he is such a good coach. And, he just gets the most out of the players on his roster no matter what. And you've got to put him in that elite tier. If you don't have him in that elite tier, you are just simply wrong. Next, we have Robert Saleh. I'm going to put Saleh in the good tier. I think he's really progressed nicely as a head coach. I had my worries about him coming into the season, but he has done an amazing job getting the most out of that defense. I think the Jets players love playing for him. They've obviously got to figure out that quarterback problem before, they can really take a step as a contender. But considering the talent on the roster, I think he's done a great job getting the most out of the players there. This defense has become one of the best units in the NFL, which is really what he was brought in to do. He's a good leader. He's a good CEO type coach as well. So I think he's continuing to show he is a good coach in this league. Next, we have Kyle Shanahan. This is a tough one. Some people may put him in the elite tier. I'm going to put him in the great tier. I think he's done, obviously, an amazing job kind of developing the offensive schemes that half the league uses. There's a reason that the Shanahan tree is so massive. I think he has done an amazing job as an offensive play caller. As a coach, I do think that there are some questionable decisions he's made throughout his tenure on the 49ers. I do think he has a good bit of say in the draft, and I don't always know that their acquisitions there have been the best. He also randomly benches players like Brandon Ayuk for the first couple seasons of his career when he's clearly the most talented. And I get it, he's getting him tried to buy into the system, but I just think that some of his coaching decisions are a bit odd, but you've got to give him credit for just being an amazing play caller and offensive mind. Next, we're going to put Sean McVay here. I think he deserves to be in the elite tier. He's won his Super Bowl now. He's one of the young, crazy, up-and-coming offensive minds, and I just think he's such a good coach. Players always love to play for him. His coaching tree is developing really nicely. We have quite a few head coaches on this list that come directly from Sean McVay. You look at Zach Taylor, Brandon Staley, Kevin O'Connell. All those guys were, directly on McVay's staff. I think he's a great communicator. I think he's a great teacher, and he's got to be in that elite tier for me. Next, we have Ron Rivera. This was kind of a tough one to put. I'm going to put him in the good tier. The Commanders are way overperforming right now. I think their defense is playing well. I think he's kind of been caught up in some unfortunate organizations. Just, being the Commanders coach is a tough gig because of the ownership there, but I think he's done a pretty good job. They're always competitive under Ron Rivera. I don't think it's a very talented team, but I do think he's a good coach, and I think he was a good coach in Carolina. He's had sustained success both in Carolina and now he's showing it that he can do it again with another team in Washington. So I think he deserves to be on that good coach tier. We are also going to put Kevin O'Connell on that good coach tier. I think he has done an amazing job in his first year with the Vikings. They currently sit at 9-2, And I think he's really kind of brought this team together, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They've done a really good job kind of taking advantage of their playmakers. Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook are all having both really good seasons. Kirk Cousins is probably having his best season in the NFL as well. So I think he's done a great job kind of revitalizing this offense and getting players to buy in kind of all across the roster. Next, we have Arthur Smith. I'm going to put him in this mediocre, unproven tier. I actually really like Arthur Smith. I think with a more talented roster, he would probably be considered a good coach. This Falcons team has a lot of holes. They have a lot of issues, but I think Arthur Smith, uses the players he has, to their best abilities. And he has created a really good run game in Atlanta with Cordarrelle Patterson, who was, kind of a weird wide receiver kick returner hybrid that he just turned into a running back, and he's been really good. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have much of a defense, but, they're still in the thick of it for the playoff hunt with one of the worst rosters in the NFL, in my opinion. So I think Arthur Smith deserves some credit. I think he's done a really good job. Next, we have Matt LaFleur. I'm going to put him in the good tier. I probably would have put him in the great tier earlier, but, with the talent on that roster, they should be better than they are. I know Aaron Rodgers isn't having his best career. I know he doesn't have a ton of playmakers to throw to, but I just think that they have to be better. I still think he's a good coach. I think he surrounds himself with good people, and I think he's a good play caller, but we just need to see a little bit more there. You get some playmakers in the building for Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, whoever it ends up being. I think that he could continue to climb this list, but right now I am going to put him in the good tier. Mike Vrabel, I think, is one of the most underrated head coaches in the NFL. I'm putting him in the great tier. I really don't think that the Titans have that talented of a team. Defensively, they are just so tough to play against. Nobody wants to play the Titans because of how Vrabel has them coached up. They're just such a physical, strong unit, and they just don't give you anything. You have to take every single yard from them, every single inch from them. I think just Vrabel has such a good mentality, such a fun mindset for this role. So I'm going to put him in the great tier there. Next, I have Doug Peterson. I'm going to put him in the mediocre, unproven tier. I think he's a good coach, but we need to see it once again. He had a really stacked team in Philadelphia when he was the coach there. Obviously, it was really impressive that they won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles. But this Jaguars team has potentially underperformed a little bit this year from where we thought they might be. It's all about the development of Trevor Lawrence, and I think he's coming along nicely. I think Peterson could potentially move up a couple of tiers here depending on how the Jaguars continue to build, but for now we are going to put him in that tier there. Next we have Kevin Stefanski. I'm going to put him in the mediocre, unproven tier. I know that, he brought the Browns to the playoffs, but I just think with the talent on this roster, you've got so many superstars. You've got Amari Cooper, you've got Nick Chubb on the offense, and one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Defensively, you've got Denzel Ward, you've got Myles Garrett, you've got great players, and I just feel like he's not always putting them in the best positions to succeed. When you have Nick Chubb and Jacoby Brissett as your quarterback, why aren't you running 20 times a game? I just don't understand it. I don't think his play calling is necessarily always great. I think that, his staff isn't the best either. The defensive coordinator, Joe Woods, needs to go, and he hasn't, made that move. So I just think I need to see a little bit more from Stefanski before I consider him, one of the good or great coaches in this league. Next, we have Andy Reid. He's got to be in the elite tier. So much sustained success for Reid, both in Philadelphia, in Kansas City, with Mahomes, without Mahomes. They've been good regardless. He is, absolutely one of the best coaches in the league and deserves to be in that elite tier. Next, we have Dennis Allen. I'm putting him in the uninspiring tier. Obviously, replacing Sean Payton was always going to be tough, but I expected this to be a smoother transition. And for the talent level on this team, I really do think that the Saints should be better. I don't fully blame Allen. I think that offensively, the play calling, the quarterback play, the wide receivers getting hurt has not helped, undoubtedly. Defensively, they've been disappointing in my opinion, though. So, that is frustrating to see, Dennis Allen, who was the defensive coordinator under Sean Payton, now moved to head coach. That defense takes a step back. That's never something you love to see in a guy that's now the head coach. But, I think he can move up this list, but for now, I think you got to put him in the uninspiring tier. This Saints team really should be better than they are. Next, we're putting Nathaniel Hackett in this fired tier. I am almost never a proponent of one-and-done coaches. I just don't think that it gives them an adequate chance to get their players in the building and really show what they're made of. But Hackett has really just proven to be a disaster of a hire. He has absolutely no clock management ability. The players that the Broncos have brought in just seem to get worse. And this offense, which is Hackett's specialty, is so bad. They're one of the worst offenses in the NFL since 2000 when it comes to points per game. I understand that, things aren't all going right. Russell Wilson maybe isn't the guy that you thought he would be, but you've got to be better than this as an offensive coach with, a unit that you thought was just a quarterback away. You go and get that quarterback, and they're so bad offensively this year. The locker room does not look like they're cohesive at all right now. I think you have to get rid of Hackett. I really do. Next, we've got Steve Wilks. We're putting him in the fired tier for now. Matt Rule was the worst coach in the NFL coming into this season. I don't really think Wilks has, proven to be amazing or terrible as the interim head coach, but the Panthers will be looking for other options. And so I don't really think there's much to talk about there with Wilks. I just don't think he is going to be the Panthers head coach next year or any head coach next year. Then we have Harbaugh. I think Harbaugh is a great coach. The Ravens have been very good under his reign. I think, he is a good locker room guy. He believes in his players. His players love playing for him. And I think he deserves to be in that great tier. So now that we have all of these guys in the tiers, we are going to rank them within the tiers. We're going to have Andy Reid be number one here. I just think he is so good. So much sustained success. Belichick number two because of what he's been able to do with a little bit of a talent-deprived roster, and Sean McVay as number three, one of my favorite coaches in the NFL there for sure. I'm going to put Mike Vrabel number one. I just think he is such an underrated coach. I love what he does. I'm going to put Shanahan next. His offensive genius is definitely something that is really impressive. He deserves to be a top 5 coach. Next, we're going to put Harbaugh. I think, their sustained success in Baltimore has been really impressive. He's one of the longest tenured coaches in the NFL and deserves to be, in that spot. Then we're going to put Sean McDermott. I think the Bills have really grown nicely under him. And then we're going to put Tomlin next. Not necessarily his best year, but certainly someone that has had a really impressive resume coaching. Next, this is going to be kind of a little bit of a tough one here in this good tier. I am going to put Sirianni next with Zach Taylor following suit. I think both of those guys have shown a little bit more as far as just sustained success in the NFL here. I'm going to put LaFleur next as well, and then Pete Carroll after that. I think those 4 guys, they've been in the league a little bit longer than some of these other guys. When you look at McDaniel and Daboll and Saleh and O'Connell, these guys have kind of been the rocks of the NFL. They've gotten their teams to the playoffs, and they've been really good. Then we're going to put Mike McDaniel next. I just think he's done such a good job getting the most out of Tua and those playmakers. His scheme has been absolutely awesome. Brian Daboll next. Just such a good year, getting the most out of that really talentless roster. I'm excited to see what he can do when he gets a little bit more, firepower on that offense in particular. Next, we're going to put Kevin O'Connell. I really like what O'Connell does. I think he has gotten the most out of Jefferson and Cook and Kirk Cousins, and he's done a great job there in Minnesota. Then Robert Saleh. I think he's done a great job getting that defense going for the Jets. And then Ron Rivera, the last in that good tier. He's done it with 2 organizations now. He's shown he's a good coach, and he's getting the most out of a Commanders team that is starting Taylor Heineke and had Carson Wentz as their quarterback to start the year. So that's really impressive for Ron Rivera. And the mediocre and unproven tier, as I mentioned, I really think Arthur Smith is a great coach. I certainly think that if you gave him a roster with a lot more talent than he has in Atlanta, he would be in that good tier for sure. Next, we're going to put Stefanski up there. Like I said, he's had some success with the Browns, but I just think he needs to get a little bit more out of his playmakers. He needs to know when to call certain plays, and he's got to get a little bit better staff. I think that defensive coordinator position is really hurting them right now. Next, we're going to put Doug Peterson. Obviously, he is a Super Bowl winning head coach. Would love to see what he can do in the development of Trevor Lawrence as his coaching career kind of continues with Jacksonville there. Next, we're going to put Mike McCarthy. Obviously, I kind of talked about what I like about McCarthy, what I don't like. He can build a great staff, and you got to give him credit for that. Next, Matt Eberflus. I think he's got his guys playing hard for him in a year where they're one of the worst rosters in the NFL. And then Dan Campbell, I think they're on the right track. I think Campbell, absolutely loves his players. His players love him, but we've just got to see the wins start to accumulate there. In the uninspiring tier, I am going to put Brandon Staley first. I have been really hard on Staley, and I think I need to see a lot more from him, but we are going to put him the first in this group. He could certainly climb if this Chargers team goes off on a run and, all that kind of stuff, but I just think he is uninspiring at this point. Then we're going to put Dennis Allen. I think he has the potential to kind of turn things around. I think career as a head coach has gotten off to a rough start with the Saints, but I do think that they had a little bit more holes than they were willing to accept. And kind of thrusting him into this role, no Sean Payton, continuing to hold on to those defensive duties, and a roster that just isn't as talented as we all thought. It was always going to be a little bit of a down year. So we'll put him there. Todd Bowles next. He's just got to get more out of a Tom Brady-led team. And then Josh McDaniels after that. In this fired tier, I am going to put Jeff Saturday there because he is probably the guy that I believe in the most when it comes to they could potentially be a quality NFL head coach moving forward. A lot of unprovenness there, but you got to like what you see from the Jeff Saturday Colts in just their ability to fight and stay in games now that he is there. I'm going to put Lovie Smith next. Nobody would have been successful with this Houston roster, and I do think that if he does get fired, he's kind of getting the raw end of the deal there. So I am going to put him next. I think he has potential to be better than he is now. Next, I am going to put Nathaniel Hackett next. I don't really have positive things to say about Hackett, but I am going to put him there. Kingsbury is next. He is one of my least favorite coaches in the NFL. Do not know why he has this position, and I have been saying that since week 1, before the season even of this year, so I continue to stand on that. And Steve Wilkes, I just don't think will ever be an NFL head coach in any capacity moving forward, so I'm going to put him last there. That's going to do it for my NFL head coach tier list here. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below which coaches should be in a different tier. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Let me know down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Please go ahead, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That helps me out so much. Give this video a thumbs up as well. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye.